Talk of Wrestling. I'm Brian Ferguson. Today, July 24th, 2025, a day of mourning. We've just learned today that Hulk Hogan, really a wrestling that changed the wrestling world in the mid 1980s, has passed at the age of 71. And I know there's a lot of things going on with that right now, but I want to bring in my good friend, George Schire. There he is. George, thanks for coming on such early notice. And I know we haven't been on for a while. I've been doing some other adventures and just got back from Waterloo. But tell us a little bit, if you would, sir. You've been doing this for a long time, and just kind of go over with the background of Hogan and his part of the business.
Well, the thing that's most important is that when I got the news this morning, I went, wow, Hulk Hogan, he's only 71. You don't expect him to pass away. But here's the thing, Brian, and it's very sad. But I do want to say this. You know that I have followed professional wrestling since 1959.
Correct.
And during that time, I have literally, in my old traveling days, going to territories, following the AWA, the WWF, any of the NWA territories, I have literally seen virtually every major megastar.
Yeah.
That was, come down the pike. And I mean, every territory in the day, they had their stars. Yeah. We in the AWA, we had the Crusher. We had Mad Dog Vachon. We had Nick Bockwinkel. We had Bobby Heenan. We had Verne Gagne. And you could go to any other territory and you can pull out 5 names that just pop out that they made that territory.
Yeah.
And they were mega stars, but interestingly enough, never on the national scope. Like the guy that's behind you there on the picture, Hulk Hogan.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that makes this the big news that it is. When it hits the CBS News radio network this morning right away, and it went across all the other major networks, there is no other wrestling star that would gain that type of national attention. And what you have to look at is that Hogan, he transcended wrestling in a way that even people that never watched it, people that didn't care about it, you could talk to them because they knew Hulk Hogan. They saw Hulk Hogan. He was in the Rocky, was it 2 or 3? Rocky 3 movie?
Rocky 3.
It was Rocky 3, and I'm always sure of that, and then I second guess myself. Believe it or not, I second guess myself. But he was in that Rocky 3 movie, and that came right in the middle of his run in the AWA when he had come here as virtually a guy who I was on the cusp. I saw this. He came to Verne Gagne. Verne wanted to use him as a heel. Hogan did not have good microphone skills. He could not rattle off all of the adjectives and everything that you'd hear him do later. Yeah. And Verne brought in, this is old news to some wrestling fans, but to the fans that weren't wrestling fans, Verne brought in luscious Johnny Valiant to be a mouthpiece for him. Because at the time, only Johnny Valiant was coming off of a tremendous multi-year run with his wrestling brother, handsome Jimmy Valiant. And they could do an interview like 2 guys you never saw. I mean, they were incredible on the microphone.
Yeah.
And so Johnny was his mouthpiece. And Hogan would stand to the camera with his back to you. And there'd be Mean Gene Okerlund trying to do an interview with him as Johnny was facing the TV audience here in the home and rattling off about this monster. But here was the thing. Verne wanted him to be a heel and the fans cheered him.
Yeah.
I was going to the arenas, and what Verne was doing is he was trying to build him up as this bully, this tall beach bum, smart aleck, cocky, arrogant, blonde. And Hogan, he could have tried harder maybe, but the fans would not buy him as a heel. And Verne would put him against two guys in the ring. A lot of times they weren't your top name wrestlers, but he put them against two guys, and Hogan would manhandle them in 5 minutes or less, and the fans were cheering him.
Yeah.
So Verne did a quick about face, and he switched him over, and man, you never saw an exit so fast. Johnny Valiant was gone, never to be heard from or mentioned again. And Hulk Hogan, Hulkamania was starting to run well. Now, here's what Verne was doing. He had some microphone voice coaching with Hogan that was done not only by some of his AWA wrestlers, but primary, and this always would surprise people, Bobby the Brain Heenan was working with Hogan behind the scenes.
Wow.
How to do a TV interview, how to get people to come out and buy a ticket. And of course, they were enemies in the ring and to the public, to the fan. But Verne had Bobby working. He had Nick work with him a little bit. And Verne himself would coach him how to do this, how to say this, get this reaction, this emotion. And so Hulkamania started, as they say, running wild. Hogan would rip off his t-shirt, and it was explosive, Brian. Now, me, I am telling you the truth. I was never a fan. I just wasn't a fan of that type of a wrestler. But I recognized from the get-go, as they say, that this guy was magic. This guy was box office. This guy was going to put the proverbial butts in the seats that promoters wanted. Yeah. And wrestling promoters of any generation were a strange breed. Even Verne Gagne. Verne wanted wrestling first, gimmick second. Right. But Verne would always put a gimmick in there if he knew it was going to draw money, i.e. the Crusher or Mad Dog Vachon or some of the other characters that he had. If they could put butts in the seat, Verne could work with it. Hogan, then he goes away and he makes this movie with Rocky Stallone. This is right after I think it was about a half a year into the Hulkamania in the AWA. So now Hogan is on the national scene via the movie screen because he was Thunderlips in the movie. The average fan or the average person that went to see the Rocky movies, they were still Sylvester Stallone fans. They liked the Rocky legacy that was being built. And then they got this charismatic Thunderlips in the movie. Hogan comes back to the AWA, and he is now not only just an AWA star, he is a star in every territory around the country. Yeah. And the the wrestling magazines of the era, they all started picking up on it, the newsstand magazines. And back in that era, there were a half a dozen to a dozen wrestling magazines coming out monthly or bi-monthly. Yeah. They realized that to sell their magazine, well, Bruno Sammartino was gone. He was no longer going to sell an issue. Right. Verne Gagne was old. He wasn't going to sell an issue. But here, this guy named Hulk Hogan. And so he was on every magazine, ripping his shirt off. I had a picture here. I guess I didn't bring that one out. But the main thing is that he was the poster child for the biggest thing ever in wrestling. Yeah. Now, Verne Gagne's, not only is his attendance going up, here's the thing. I want to point this out. Pro wrestling had a surge in new fans in about 1981, 2, and 3. And what had happened, Brian, is that my era of fan at that time, and I was 35 years old. Yeah. I had followed wrestling for 10 or 12 or 15 years. but you had these younger kids that now were coming in, and they were, anywhere from 8 to 17 years old. They weren't interested in the old guy, Verne Gagne. They weren't interested in the old guy, Pat O'Connor. They were interested in, oh my God, this Hogan, this character. And they'd seen him in the movie theater. So Hogan just was able to grab that national audience right away. Now,
Yeah.
all of these promotions around the country in those 3 years I mentioned, they were doing record box office with their own versions of their Hulk, the Junkyard Dog being the big name
Yeah.
in the South, and Dusty Rhodes down in Florida, etc.
Mm-hmm.
But the deal is that Hogan was bigger than life. And when Vince Jr. decided that, and let's keep in mind that Vince Jr. now was 33, 34 years old.
Yeah.
He was not a promoter in the same vein that his daddy was, who was now elderly in his 60s, suffering from prostate cancer. He was not in the vein of the promoters of the Don Owen, the Verne Gagne, the Roy Schire, the Paul Bosch, the Fritz von Erich, Eddie Graham, Don Luce, Sam Muchnick, wherever you were, these guys were all 50, 60, and some of them older years older. And they literally were resting on the theory that if it's not broke, you don't fix it. And the territorial system had worked with their handshake for all these decades. And we're not going to change it. And Hulk Hogan's not going to tell us what to do. This is Verne's attitude. Verne, everybody out there, no matter who you talk to, they'll say, well, Verne should have put the title on Hogan and he would have stayed. That's speculation, hindsight. We don't know that.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that Vince McMahon targeted Hogan because of his charismatic, colorful presentation. And there was no other wrestler, no one, whether it be a Dusty or a Junkyard Dog or whoever you want to name, Superfly Snuka, they were all big, Randy Savage, but none of them could compete on a level like Hogan did. And if Vince was going to succeed, he knew he had to grab Hogan. But we want to make it clear that Hulkamania started and was created by Verne Gagne. It's sad that Verne didn't see how to take it a step farther. And then we get to December of '83. Hogan had been in Japan. He sends the telegram to Verne that he's not coming back.
Yeah.
And, Verne and Greg, they tell you the story. Well, Verne thought it was a joke from Eddie Graham playing a prank on him, And, well, Hulk Hogan didn't show up a few hours before the card. Hogan's not here on that Christmas night card. And Greg says he called him and said, hey, Hulk, where are you? Hogan supposedly said, I'm not coming back. Vince has paid me to not show up. And Greg will tell you the story. And I'm not disputing it.
Right.
But Greg says that Hogan said that Vince paid him not to appear. Greg says he told Hogan, well, hey, Hulk, come in and fulfill your commitments and then leave if you're going to. But because again, Brian, as you and I have talked, the wrestling TV shows were always taped 2, 3, 4 weeks in advance. So Hulk Hogan was advertised all over the AWA for about 4 to 5 to 6 weeks out from this particular no show that was happening.
Yeah. And
Verne had to go out, and the irony of it is that he put Baron von Raschke that night in the Christmas card place of Hulk Hogan. Now, nothing against the Baron. God love the guy. He's just one of the greatest. He just got the Impact Award in the business.
Yeah.
And just a bona fide superstar. But sorry, Baron, you weren't a Hulk Hogan at that point. And Baron would admit that for his wrestling days, he wasn't the Baron he had been 5 or 10 years earlier. So there you go. The fans were being fed a substitute. The other part of it is that on that same card, Dr. D. David Schultz was going to be against Hogan. It was a 6-man tag. and it was Hogan and the High Flyers
Mm-hmm.
against Sheik, Adnan Casey, Mr. Saito, and Dr. D. David Schultz. And this was a follow-up, Brian, on the fact that Schultz and Hogan had several encounters already. Their feud was box office. And also Schultz was teamed with Mr. Saito at the time. So this was the six-man match to a great main event above it. Well, Baron gets to substitute on the babyface side. And then Dr. D did not show. It was announced that he's not coming back because Hogan insisted that Dr. D come with him to the WWF with Vince. Okay. So Schultz is gone. Verne announced that due to his unruly tactics that Schultz had been suspended. The reality was he left. Now we go down, we flash forward about 3 weeks into January. And the very first AWA or the very first WWF card is played out at the Metropolitan Sports Center in Bloomington, Minnesota, which for hockey fans was their former home for the North Stars. And guess what Vince's main event was? Dr. D. David against Hulk Hogan. And that was his main event. Fans were confused, Brian. This was the start, the bullet that was fired in the end of December. And then Vince started he took Bobby Heenan. He eventually got Jesse Ventura. Eventually, even Mad Dog went to him. But Mad Dog was in the twilight of his career. He was just trying to pick up a payday. Vince was going to pay him more just to irritate Verne. It's really what it came down to. And then here's the bottom line. As this expansion thing took place, Vince started taking wrestlers from the other territories. The Von Erichs. You know, he took Kerry Von Erich. He took the Freebirds. He took Million Dollar Man from Mid-South. He took Junkyard Dog from Mid-South. He took Hacksaw Duggan from Mid-South. Now you look at that, what I just said, 4 names that were the top tier of the Mid-South Bill Watts promotion at the time. They're gone. You go down to, he even took Dusty Rhodes and etc. He just kept it up, raiding all the territories. Before you know it, Vince was on top of the world. He had all these stars and all these other promoters were struggling to get different people to come in. And before you know it, it became the it thing to get a call from Vince to go work for him. So, but now we've said all that. Hulk Hogan passing is indeed sad. Very young, too young to pass. I honestly believe I was asked by a newspaper reporter earlier today. He said, what would Hulk Hogan's impact be on the wrestling business? And I think that's a fair question that we can answer here.
Sure.
Hulk Hogan was, for professional wrestling, in my opinion, the biggest name ever since I became a fan. And all the years before I wasn't a fan. He is the biggest name. And here's why I say that. No wrestler, whether it be Stone Cold Steve Austin or Rock Dwayne Johnson or Superfly Snuka or Bruiser Brody or anybody you want to name. You can go down and list Randy Savage, doesn't matter. Hulk Hogan brought a national attention to professional wrestling that no other wrestler has since, and I don't ever think can again. And he had longevity on his side. He was Hulk Hogan for close to 20 years. Now, like any celebrity, you know, I guess I always look at it when you're looking at news reporting, you know, you got to take the good with the bad. And we can honestly ask a question: was Hulk Hogan the standout guy that a lot of people would have believed he was? You know, for many years as a wrestler, he told the kids, eat your vitamins, take your vitamins, say your prayers. And in the same time, Hogan is all juiced up on steroids. And he denied that he was. He denied to the public. He'd go on, he was on
Yeah.
late night TV shows. He
Yeah.
was on Arsenio Hall. He was on Letterman. He was on Leno at the time, nighttime shows. He was on David, I think it's David Belzer. It's one of the Belzers. He had a daytime talk show.
Yeah.
Hogan
Okay.
was all over the place,
Yeah.
and he would deny it. And then eventually it comes out that, yes, he admitted, I was taking steroids. I always took steroids. He got into the controversy with Vince McMahon with the steroid abuse trial that McMahon went through in the 90s.
Yeah.
Vince claimed that he didn't have any knowledge of steroids in the locker room, and I didn't tell wrestlers to take them. We found out later that all of that was a lie, and Hogan was part of all of that.
Yeah.
We know that in recent years, Hogan ran into fire where he was even kind of blackballed for a while from the WWE. They had basically removed him from all of their sites
Yeah.
because of some racial slurs that he had made against
Yeah.
Black people. And, you know, and in our politically correct world today, there's always people out there that are ready to jump all over you when you do something that isn't PC.
Yeah.
And Hogan would try to defend himself, and he'd get into more trouble. And he had this deal with his family. His daughter had some issues, family issues,
Mhm.
and you know, he ended up getting divorced. And you know, his personal life kind of became you know, he had it on TV. What was it? What was the
Hogan
name
knows
of his program?
best.
Hogan Knows Best.
Yeah.
You know, and a reality show that showed a whole different side.
Yeah.
But the bottom line, and then, you know, I heard somebody today say, well, you know, the other thing that didn't help him was when he was out there campaigning at the national convention for Donald Trump last November, which he was. He
Yeah.
was
Yeah, I did.
he was at the national convention the night of the acceptance for Trump. Hogan was out there and ripped off and had a Trump T-shirt underneath. You know,
He did. Yeah.
What you have there in our politically crazed world, we no longer have a world where even politics can be a friendly conversation. People are divided no matter what,
Yeah.
and so, you know, immediately everybody that was for Trump, if they didn't like Hogan, or if they liked Hogan, they didn't like him anymore because he supported Trump. That's how it would have went on that side. And if they
Yeah.
were a Hogan fan and they were a Trump fan, it was paradise for them. So the whole thing is it's Hulk Hogan, his impact, Brian. There is no wrestler from, I mean, we can name Gorgeous George, who revolutionized the wrestling in the beginning of TV era. You know,
Yeah.
everybody knows everybody, whether you are a
Mhm.
wrestling fan or never watched it in your life, you know who
Yeah.
Gorgeous George was.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think to the average person on the street, regardless of who you are, you can mention Hulk Hogan and they know who he is. Now,
Yeah.
if you mention on the street the average person, as big as some of these guys were, Dusty Rhodes, who's that? Or even Ric Flair, they didn't have the national
Exposure.
exposure that Hogan did. So
Yeah.
the fact that he passed away and the impact that he had on this business, whether you agreed with him, whether you liked his wrestling, whether you were a fan, you know, he transcended the business like no one ever did before him, and I'm really doubtful anyone ever can again.
Yeah, I've got to agree. I would say the only more popular wrestler that people don't know of today, back in your era of the 50s and 60s, was Verne Gagne. He had a lot of national exposure, kind of like Hogan on Dumont, and then getting all the papers, but not like Hogan did in the 80s. And I'll tell you, I was a teenager, really, or preteen in the early teens when Hogan came on the scene in the AWA. I'm from, not too far from where you are, a couple hours northwest, or I'm sorry, northeast in right on the border of Wisconsin there. And I can remember Hogan coming out there uh, first with Johnny Valiant, and then when people were still cheering for him, and he got his speaking abilities, his mic abilities going. I mean, the guy was on fire. I mean, everybody in my school, when elementary and junior high, knew who he was.
Yeah.
And he had brought such excitement and charisma, and the matches with Bockwinkel.
Off the
I know we've
charts
talked
good.
about this. Yeah, they were off the chart. And I will say, Hogan, like you said, until he got to the AWA, he had been bouncing around all over the place
Mhm.
before that
Yeah.
and really didn't get any traction. He got a little some places, but not near what he had when he got into the AWA and he started working with Verne and all the other wrestlers and Bobby Heenan, like you said, and Nick. And
The other thing I would tell you when you mentioned Bobby Heenan,
mhm,
part of the deal for Hogan too, when him and Vince were discussing this, him coming in,
yeah,
um, he said Bobby Heenan should come with him too. And Bobby Heenan and him to the fans were enemies, of course.
right,
But uh, Brian, one of the things I've learned as old as I've gotten, you realize that life is most of the time about being in the right place at the right time. So a
yeah,
lot of times it's not what you plan. It's not how you can have 5, 10, 20-year goals, but you look back and you go, well, that never happened,
yeah,
because this happened instead. And
hmm
you just happened that something changed. Um, you know, the Hulk Hogan thing, he I don't think if he'd have come to Verne, he would have been as big a star, only because 3 years before Verne, he had had that brief run in the WWF as a heel
right,
with Freddie Blassie as his manager,
manager,
where
yeah,
Blassie did all the talking. They had a match. Hogan wrestled Andre the Giant, and Andre went over in that match in Shea Stadium. Now
yeah,
this is 1979 or 80, whatever the Shea Stadium card was.
right, yeah,
And Hogan, after that, was disgruntled. That just happened to be, you talk about the right place at the right time. It just so happened that Greg Gagne was on that same card.
yeah,
And that's when Hogan and Greg met. And Greg, this part is true from Greg. Hogan was kind of despondent. He said, I'm just not going anywhere. And Greg told him, he said, call my dad, call Verne.
yeah, yeah,
And Greg mentioned to Greg or to Verne that there's this guy out there who I think there's something there.
hmm
Verne brought him in, but before that, you go to some of the real smaller southern territories.
yeah,
Uh, Hulk wrestled as Sterling Golden for a
yeah,
very short period of time. And who the hell is Sterling Golden? Nobody
yeah,
knows. And
yeah,
then he was Terry Boulder, for
yeah,
Terry the Hulk Boulder, I will add. And he was teamed up with his brother, Eddie Boulder.
yeah,
And Eddie Boulder was in the AWA the same time that Hogan was as Dizzy Ed Boulder for
yeah, I remember
AWA
that,
fans. And
yeah,
Dizzy Ed was a heel, no connection to Hogan at all in the AWA when Hogan was there. But
yeah,
Dizzy Ed Boulder, those fans know that are close to it, that he went on to fame in the WWF as Brutus the Barber Beefcake.
that's right, yeah,
So
yeah,
Hogan, he was simply the guy.
yeah,
I've said this over the years every time, and then
yeah,
I just want to say this again. I honestly don't believe, and I can't be proven wrong because we can't go back in time. But if we could,
hmm
I want to believe I'd be saying I told you so.
yeah,
I honestly believe that had Verne put the title on Hogan, like everybody says he should have, I still believe in my heart that when Vince McMahon came knocking on the door, Hogan would have left. I never felt differently
yeah,
about that to this
yeah,
very day. because Verne couldn't do the national thing that Vince was trying to do. Verne didn't know how. And even if he'd have thought about it, he didn't have the people around him to pull it off, nor did any of the other 60-plus-year-old promoters. And there was the key. It was the one time when youth, Vince being 33, 34 years old at the time, he had a vision that no one else, even if they thought of it, they didn't know how to pull the trigger. There's a difference. There's a difference between thinking about something and knowing how to make it happen. And the older promoters were content in their territorial fences to let business run as it did. And it was a great system. But the cracks were in the foundation as soon as Junior took over from Daddy Vince. And there's no way I'm ever going to be convinced that it would have been any different. The only thing I will always contend is that if Hogan had not been available or refused to go, I still think, and I've always felt this way, Vince Jr. was still going to succeed because he had a dream that the others couldn't conceive. And it would have taken him longer, whether he tried to do it, like I said earlier, with a Randy Savage or with a Ricky Steamboat or a Paul Orndorff or a Dusty Rhodes or a Ric Flair, whoever it was. I'm not saying he couldn't have done it, but it would have taken him a lot longer than 1 year to get to WrestleMania, WrestleMania 1. And you had Mr. T and all these celebrities in there. And see, Vince had the rock and wrestling connection. He brought music into it. You brought in the fans of Cyndi Lauper and all of the bubblegum music and the young kids who idolize these young stars. It became popular to be with Hulk Hogan. And before that time, wrestling was never put in that category. If you talk to anybody, oh, that's pro wrestling. We're not going to give that any attention. It had its cult following. As big as it was. We always, but the other thing that Hulk Hogan did was I grew up for the time I was 8 years old up until, let's just say, Hulkamania started big and the Rocky movie came out. I grew up in the era where I couldn't talk to people, the average people on the street or friends that didn't like wrestling. I've told you this. Oh, you like wrestling? That stuff's fake. And you can't talk to them. They don't want to watch. But Hulk Hogan made it different because now they were talking about wrestling. And I just happened to be able to join in on the conversation. So Hogan, no wrestler, I don't care who you want to name, has never had the impact. And like I said, I've been around this business for 60 some years. No one has ever had the impact on a national level, not only here, but in Japan, where he was a megastar. I mean, so Hulk Hogan, no, you may not care for him. He may not have been the best person all the time. He may have had his faults, but on God's world, who doesn't? And the bottom line is that to dispute anything that he gave to the business, he gave of himself 120%. Was he the best wrestler? Hell no. The guy couldn't wrestle. Any wrestler of the wrestling mode, like a Gagne or a Thez or O'Connor or Snyder, and we go down the line, they would have killed him in 30 seconds in a legit match. The guy didn't know it. And as Adrian would say, they didn't know a wrist rock from an arm lock or a wristwatch from Hogan didn't know a whole, but he had that ability to drag you in, and no wrestler since. And so he is, in my opinion, I don't even, Ric Flair does. I mean, Ric Flair is pretty much mainstream, but not even the everyday on the street people know who Ric Flair is. If you're not a wrestling fan, there are people that don't know who Ric Flair is. But you could pick on any Joe Schmo walking down the sidewalk and say, hey, do you know who Hulk Hogan was? they'll
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And to me, that says it all.
Yeah.
You can't make any more of an impact than that. That when you pass away and they put you on the news, everybody knows who you are.
Very true. I want to say, I think after his WWFE run, and he went to, Vince passed him off in the pastures basically, and he went to WCW. He did a little run there, but I'll tell you, and I don't know how much you followed it back in the 90s. I
I
know you're
followed
kind of
WCW during the promotional wars between them and
okay.
Vince when Ted Turner
So
had it.
the biggest to me, I'll never forget it, is when Hogan turned on Macho Man at Bash at the Beach in '96.
Yep.
He was the
Yep.
third man in NWO. Nobody expected it.
Yep.
Nobody. I mean, I was in Waterloo this past weekend, as you were, but I went to the Bischoff seminar, and he explained that nobody but himself, Hogan, and Sting, because Sting was the backup in case Hogan changed his
Oh,
mind.
yeah.
Hogan was
Yeah.
reluctant. He was reluctant to do the face turn because he had been a baby face for so long that he at first was really reluctant to do it. Once he arrived at the arena, they looked at his body language, they knew he was going to do it. And I think even before this is before internet, Facebook, all that stuff, but still, locker room talk, and nobody knew nothing except for Bischoff, Sting, and Hogan.
Yeah.
Until like 2 minutes before the match, they told Hall and Nash and the other guys in the ring what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So that was a great turn, and it lasted for a while. It fizzled out after a couple of years because they went kind of in a direction they shouldn't have, but that's neither here nor there. And Hogan, to me, like you said, he was a person, you mentioned his name to anybody, they're going to know who he is. And you talked about his show, Hogan Knows Best. I think a lot of those reality shows that have families on them, the couple usually ends up, unfortunately, getting divorced because their dirty laundries aired out to everybody. And Linda and Hulk were married for over 20 years.
Yeah.
Like 25 years, and they got divorced because of I don't know really why, but I'm assuming a good chunk of it was because of that show and all those, his kids. He's got a son too, Nick and Brooke. They got in some heat for a while, but Hogan reshaped himself here in the last, especially 10 years. He's kind of was going on this path. He found God. He was very religious the last several years of his life. And yes, he started a brewing company. And he did some other adventures. I don't remember exactly. But actually, what's kind of odd is I had one of those Hulk Hogan beers this past weekend. A friend of mine gave me one. It wasn't bad, but I was just like, oh yeah. And I was just thinking this morning after I heard him pass, I said, man, that was the first time I ever had one of his beers. And just thinking about it, I mean, you see that poster behind me with him. I got that poster when I was 15 15 years old. Okay, so that's quite a few years ago. And I actually used it I had to do a speech on physical fitness, like for the FBI and stuff like that in high school. And they said you have to have a poster or something to show during your presentation. Yeah, visual. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I had the banner up and I had a little curtain on it. And I was talking about, oh yeah, physical fitness, this and that. And I ripped the towel off it or whatever, and I had that poster on there. Everybody kind of giggled, but he's a physical specimen at the time. And but everybody knew I was a wrestling fan. And so Hulk Hogan had a very big impact on the 80s generation kids for sure.
And Brian, to that statement, I think you just echoed what I said earlier.
Mm-hmm.
When all those years I was growing up, I had to be careful when I mentioned wrestling. I had to keep it a secret.
Yeah.
I was ridiculed if I liked it, unless there was another fan out there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you look at the impact that Hogan had,
Yeah.
that was no longer the case. It was now, no matter where you were, whether you were talking music, whatever you were talking about, Hogan
Mm-hmm.
was there.
Yeah.
Um, you know, you got to remember that even Sports Illustrated magazine put
That's
him
right.
on their cover,
Yeah.
and no pro wrestler. Now I'll clarify this. No professional wrestler had been on the cover of a Sports Illustrated ever, because of course Sports Illustrated would never have considered pro wrestling to be a real sport.
Right.
The one exception was back in the 50s. I can't remember, it was 54 or 55, when Danny Hodge was on the cover of a Sports Illustrated. But he was on because of his AAU championships, his amateur background, and it
Right.
was had nothing to do with pro wrestling.
Yeah.
But he was a pro wrestler.
Yeah.
And that was the only other, but that was not discussing pro wrestling at all. It was discussing this specimen, this physical specimen that Danny Hodge was.
Yeah.
But Hogan, uh, I can still see the cover, a pink cover of Sports Illustrated with Hogan ripping the shirt off on the cover.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and like I said, it was a time when it didn't matter what TV show you turned on, Me TV or not Me TV, MTV music. What is it? The
MTV.
video
Yeah.
MTV.
Yeah. It was
They
then. Yeah.
It was then. They were there. You had that rock and wrestling connection, and they
Yeah.
were putting out uh, graham crackers with Hogan's picture on them, or shaped as Hogan, and
Yeah.
graham, popsicles, and he was on everything.
Yeah.
And so when a guy passes
Mm-hmm.
that has had that kind of an impact, and yes, in life you're going to have ups, you're going to have downs, you're going to have
Yeah.
bumps.
Yeah.
That this wasn't the best thing he ever did here, or boy, that wasn't a good move.
Yeah.
But overall, with a career, um, this guy he's the biggest thing ever
Yeah.
to
In
bring
wrestling.
people together.
Yeah.
Because like I say, you didn't have to be a wrestling fan. You could never attend a match in your life, and you could care little to do so, but you knew who Hulk Hogan was, and
Yeah.
you listened to him when he was on TV, when he
Yeah.
was on a late night show or whatever. So his passing, for the wrestling business, I think is the biggest passing we've ever had. And when I say that, it's not because I was a Hulk Hogan fan.
Right.
But I would be the first to say, you know what? If I was a promoter back in the day, and you give
Mm-hmm.
me one name I can have on my cards, I don't care who my personal favorites are. I want Hulk Hogan.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just common logic.
Yeah.
And he had that.
Yeah.
So I don't think we're ever going to hear another wrestling star, at least probably my lifetime, that's going to be able to accomplish what Hulk Hogan did. And like I say, he was controversial. He
Yeah.
had some times when he wasn't a good person.
Yeah.
He wasn't always truthful,
Yeah.
but that doesn't take away with what he gave to the business,
Yeah. No.
and just to the world. I mean,
Yeah.
it isn't just the wrestling business; it's
No.
everything.
Yeah. He was a very, yes, he had his bumps in the road like everybody else, but overall, uh, not just in the wrestling business, but he went out and did charitable
Yeah,
work with
yeah.
different organizations and was an overall very good person. I've never met the man personally, but you know,
Well, and Brian, I want to say this too. In recent years, and let's just take the last 5, 6, 7 years. I think it's always difficult for a megastar, no matter what field you are in, what genre you're in.
Yeah.
I think it's always a sobering reality when all of a sudden there are other people that are more popular than you, or your star isn't shining as bright as it used to. And
Yeah.
again, it's a generational thing. The new stars come along, but I think that's tough for somebody and old age is something when you're in a business like Hulk. That's the reason most of these old time wrestlers hung on until they were 80 years old. And I tease when I say that, but it's like they can't give up that limelight.
Yeah.
And a guy of Hogan's stature, I think that's always something that they have to wrestle with. No pun intended.
Yeah.
They just it can take away their identity. It can depress them. It can make them sometimes bitter.
Yeah.
But with Hogan, I like I say, I don't know anybody. I can't name a single wrestler
Mm-hmm.
that could even come close
Yeah.
to what he meant to everybody.
Yeah. No doubt. I will say it again. He had a huge impact on my generation of the 80s. There is no doubt. Yeah, anybody my age, especially, knows who Hulk Hogan is.
Yeah.
And like you said, he was an impact for a lot of years. And then, yes, he had the bumps, but he also revived himself and put out some other things and some other products, kept his name relevant
Yeah.
up until his passing today.
Yeah.
And the man, whether you liked him or not, he made a difference. And he will always have that, like you said, the biggest star in the world in professional wrestling, and brought it to a national level, international level.
Yeah.
And you can't take that away from him. And I wish nothing but the best for his family and his close friends.
Yes.
I know right now they are probably just in awe and don't know how to react, or they're, because it came to a surprise to a lot of people. I know he's having some health issues, but I don't think they expected to have a heart attack this morning and not be revived. And so I know I'm part of the WFIA like you are, George, and we are going to send a card uh, with our condolences to the family here in a little bit. I'm going to go send that out just to say our condolences to you and your family, and we want to honor him in the best we can. And I think just a simple card would do
Yeah.
that. And this podcast today, George, I really appreciate you coming on here, doing this. I called him this morning after the news broke, and he was willing to come on, and I appreciate it. And so, George,
Let me say
go
this,
ahead
Brian.
one more time.
Yeah, let me say this. Pro wrestling by its very nature, we've got all these halls of fame. We've got all these gatherings. We've got all these events that honor wrestlers, the Cauliflower Alley Club, where they're paying homage to all the guys in the business that have been impactful. And, we've got the WWE's Hall of Fame, which is basically in the minds of the people putting it on, but they put on a good production and great. Here's what I honestly believe. I don't think there is a Hall of Fame or wannabe Hall of Fame out there that should not immediately we mentioned Barron earlier for getting an Impact Award, which is something that the George Tragos Luthez Museum has created, because Barron was honored as he was inducted into the Hall of Fame back in 2002.
Right.
But I think the word impact comes to mind right here. I think there should be an immediate, every Hall of Fame that Hulk Hogan is in that Hall of Fame for, if they want to call it impact or whatever they want to call it. I think he's in it, and he is the poster child for the business.
Yeah.
I think he's that big. I think his impact is that big. And again, this is coming from a guy who, I wasn't a Hulk Hogan fan.
Right.
I watched him. I enjoyed his matches. I
Right.
enjoyed the storylines, but I
Yeah.
was never going to, if you say, who's your favorite wrestler? Well, I got news for you. Hogan's not on the list. But I can't take away from what this guy did.
Yeah.
And I think automatically there is no other wrestler right now in the business, before, currently, or later, that can have that impact. And I think he deserves to be elevated right now to the top. Hulk Hogan, you're
100%,
in.
100%.
And it should be immediate.
Yeah.
That's the guy that brought wrestling to the forefront, like no other wrestler since.
100% agree with you. And again, it's just everybody's in shock right now. And again, I want to thank you one more time, George Schire. Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. This was a last minute thing because I haven't done one of these in a while because I've been doing other adventures. And so I appreciate it. When I called George, he immediately accepted. And this will be out tonight here in the next few hours for sure to get it going. So one more time, Mr. George Schire, thank you, sir, for coming on. We really appreciate it. And I want to say one more time, our condolences, our thoughts and prayers out to the Balea family and friends. I hope you get through this traumatizing and difficult time. And, we have nothing but prayers for you. So again, give some support to this family. I wouldn't go harass them at their house and stuff, but I'm saying just send a message to them. Send them a card, send them an email, send them a message on Facebook, a positive note, encouraging this family through this difficult time. So I'm going to leave it at that. One more time, George Schire, thank you, sir, for coming on. And for those watching and listening, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And if you haven't subscribed, please do so. And we will talk again soon.